I was 43 when I told myself I had finally found it. The thing most men spend their whole lives chasing but never quite hold. Family. Not the illusion of one. Not the fractured pieces I had brushed against in younger years, but something solid. A structure I could pour myself into until it was undeniable. It began at a friend's birthday party. A loud bar, the kind with sticky tables and music that drowned out half the conversation. Emily was there. Shoulder-length brown hair, tired eyes that still sparkled when she laughed too hard. She wasn't the kind of woman who tried to dazzle a room. She was quieter, but steady. And when she spoke about her kids, there was this mixture of exhaustion and pride in her voice that drew me in. We started seeing each other almost immediately. No games, no slow drip of messages stretched over weeks. She was clear from the start. She had 2 children, Tyler and Hannah, and they were her world. If I wanted her, I had to accept them too. I nodded without hesitation. It sounded like a challenge, but also like an invitation. Within months, I was no longer a guest at her apartment. My toothbrush stood next to hers in the bathroom. My shirts hung awkwardly in the same closet as Tyler's soccer gear and Hannah's dresses. The transition was quicker than I expected, but Emily said it felt right, and I wanted to believe that. The kids were cautious with me. Tyler was 8 then, Hannah only 6. They were polite, but polite in the way strangers are. Measured words, guarded expressions, testing how long I'd last before disappearing like their real father always did. Dan. That was his name. A man who existed more in excuses than in flesh. He called sometimes, usually when the guilt pressed too heavy. He'd make promises he never kept. Tickets to a ball game, a weekend at the zoo, a visit on Hannah's birthday. The kids would wait by the window, restless, believing for a few hours that maybe this time would be different. It never was. By evening, Emily would tuck them into bed with soft apologies, and I would sit in the living room, fists clenched, furious at a man I barely knew. So I filled the silence he left. Started small, picking Tyler up from practice when Emily was stuck at work. Sitting with Hannah at the kitchen table, helping her cut colored paper for a school project. But small things become habits, and habits become expectations. Soon it was me leaving the office early to make the school run. Me sitting in the waiting room at urgent care when Hannah caught the flu. Me swiping my debit card for soccer fees, recital costumes, school trips. There was no single moment when I decided to become their father. It was more like a tide, inching higher every day, until one morning I woke and realized I was waist-deep in responsibilities no one had asked me to shoulder, but everyone relied on. Emily thanked me at first. She'd put her hand on my arm, whisper how much it meant, how much easier life felt with me around. I believed her, believed that gratitude was a seed that would grow into something lasting, something deeper than the fragile foundations I had seen in other men's lives. The kids remained slow to warm. Tyler rarely called me anything but hey or you. Hannah would answer my questions, smile when I brought her little surprises, but I could see the hesitation in her eyes. They were waiting to see if I would leave like the other one had. Waiting to see if I was another placeholder in a long series of men their mother let into the house. So I worked for it. Patiently, deliberately, I worked my way into their routines. I was there on the mornings Tyler forgot his homework and we had to race back before the bell. I was there when Hannah's tooth finally fell out and she panicked at the blood. I was there when Emily worked late, when they had nightmares, when their father forgot to call on Christmas. It became a rhythm. Tyler started asking if I'd watch him play, even when Dan had promised he'd come. Hannah reached for my hand at crosswalks. On weekends, I'd load them both into the car and drive to the park, the movies, the diner with milkshakes they liked. They didn't call me Dad, but for the first time I felt like I was more than a guest. When Emily suggested moving to a bigger place, I didn't hesitate. We found a house in Austin, 2 stories, white siding, wide backyard. Expensive, more than I should have agreed to, but I convinced myself it was worth it. I signed the papers, emptied my savings, stretched my credit thin, because I believed that's what fathers do. They sacrifice today for the shape of tomorrow. That house felt like proof. Proof that I wasn't temporary. proof that after years of drifting through apartments and half-built relationships, I had finally rooted myself into something real. The sacrifices piled up quietly, like bricks in a wall. Tyler needed braces? I wrote the check. Hannah wanted to join dance? I paid the fees, bought the shoes, drove her to rehearsals. When school trips came, I was the one to sign the permission slips, to make sure there was money for snacks and souvenirs. And when Dan appeared once every year or two, it was always the same. He arrived with gifts, big ones, shiny toys, video game consoles, new sneakers. He made grand promises, then vanished again. I used to think the kids would see through it, recognize the difference between fireworks and the steady flame that warmed the house. But children cling to spectacle, and no matter how many quiet sacrifices I made, I could never compete with the flash of a man who cost them nothing. Still, I told myself it was enough. That the everyday things, the flu medicine at midnight, the bills I paid without complaint, the mornings I drove them to school, would add up to something indestructible. Sometimes, at night, when the house was finally quiet, I'd walk through the hall and listen to the sound of their breathing through closed doors. In those moments, I let myself believe I had built it. Family. Something whole, something permanent. I told myself the word stepfather didn't matter. That blood was a weak excuse compared to presence. That the years I poured into them, the money, the effort, the steady hand when everything else was chaos, surely it would count for something. And maybe, just maybe, it did. For 9 years, I lived inside that illusion. I held it, fed it, protected it. I believed I was more than tolerated. I believed I was building something no one could take away. It happened on an ordinary afternoon, the kind that should have been forgettable. The kids had friends over, laughter in the living room, the thud of footsteps up the stairs, the shrill noise of teenagers filling every corner of the house. I had been in the kitchen, rinsing out coffee mugs, trying to ignore the chaos. I was used to it. That was family life, wasn't it? Noise, clutter, interruptions. I wasn't supposed to hear it. I hadn't gone looking for it. But as I carried a load of laundry past Hannah's room, the words floated out through the half-open door. Her voice, sharper than I had ever heard it, carried above the chatter of her friends. He's temporary anyway. He'll disappear. The laughter that followed was the cruelest part. High-pitched, careless, like glass shattering on a hard floor. I froze in the hallway, the laundry basket cutting into my arms, my chest suddenly hollow. Temporary. Disappear. It wasn't said in anger, not in the heat of a fight where words come cheap and wild. No, Hannah had said it casually, like a fact everyone knew, like a joke that had already been told behind my back. I stayed there, silent, long enough to hear them change the subject, long enough for the laughter to die down. Then I forced myself to move, step by step down the hall, the weight of the basket nearly unbearable though it held nothing but clothes. When Emily came home later that evening, I told her. I didn't want to, but I had to. I sat her down, recited the words exactly as I had heard them, hoping, maybe, she would be as stunned as I was, that she would take my side, tell me it wasn't true, that the kids didn't see me as temporary. But she didn't. She sighed, rubbed her temples and said, "Don't take it personally. They're just kids. They don't mean it. Don't take it personally." I laughed then, a sound without humor, the sound of a man trying not to break. Don't take it personally? Emily, I've been here for nearly a decade. I've paid for everything. I've raised them. They're just kids, she repeated, sharper this time. You're reading too much into it. Reading too much into it. The conversation ended there, but the words didn't leave me. That night, I lay awake beside her while she slept, staring at the ceiling. My mind replayed Hannah's voice, that casual cruelty, over and over until it was a chant. He's temporary anyway. He'll disappear. By morning, something in me had hardened. At breakfast, I sat across from Hannah and Tyler. The smell of toast and coffee filled the air, but the taste of betrayal was stronger. My hands trembled slightly as I asked the question that had been festering in me since the night before. Do you see me as your dad? The room went quiet. Tyler shrugged first, his eyes fixed on his plate. You're cool. We appreciate you. Appreciate. As if I were a teacher or a coach, not the man who had raised them. Hannah looked up then, eyes wide but not apologetic. She nodded slightly, almost kind. Yeah, we appreciate you. Appreciate. Not love. Not father. The word struck like a knife. I forced myself to smile, to nod, to act as though their half-hearted gratitude had satisfied me. Inside, I felt the last piece of illusion crumble. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I didn't tell them how much I had given, how much I had sacrificed. I simply stood, cleared my plate, and walked away. But that same day I began to act. While they were at school and Emily was at work, I logged into the bank account we shared. I stared at the numbers. My paychecks, my savings, every dollar I had poured into this house, this family. Quietly, deliberately, I transferred what was mine back into a separate account. Not all of it, just enough to remind myself that I existed outside of them. Enough to breathe on my own if the house burned down around me. Then I began to pack. Not loudly, not in a storm of slammed doors and accusations. Piece by piece, drawer by drawer. A suitcase hidden in the closet, slowly filling with my clothes, my books, the photographs I had of my life before them. All the while, I kept smiling at the dinner table, kept driving Tyler to practice, kept asking Hannah about her homework. Outwardly, nothing had changed, but inside I was gone already. That night, lying in bed beside Emily, I stared at her sleeping face and realized I didn't recognize her anymore. She had become a stranger who excused my erasure, who told me not to take personally the fact that her daughter had already written me out of her life. I thought of the house I had paid for, the bills I covered, the years of effort I had poured into them. And I thought of Hannah's words. Temporary. Disappear. For the first time in 9 years, I allowed myself to believe she might be right. The decision didn't come with fireworks. It wasn't dramatic. It was a quiet shift, like a door clicking shut in a dark hallway. By the time I fell asleep, I knew the truth. This family had never truly been mine, and soon they would understand what temporary really looked like. The day I left, the sky was clear. No thunder, no storm, nothing dramatic to mark the occasion. Just sunlight spilling over the house I had paid for, warming the walls that had never truly belonged to me. I had been planning it for days, maybe weeks, though I didn't admit it to myself until that morning. My suitcase was already packed, hidden in the trunk of my car. My accounts had been rearranged. My papers, my documents, the pieces of my life that no one had ever noticed or valued. I had gathered them in silence. All that remained was the final act. That evening, I moved through the house like a ghost. Tyler sat in the living room, shouting into a headset while his video game flickered across the television. Hannah was upstairs, music pounding from behind her door. Emily was in the kitchen, humming as she chopped vegetables, oblivious. To anyone watching, it looked like a normal night. But I knew it was the last one. I went first to Hannah's room. She wasn't there, but the evidence of my years was scattered across the floor and desk. The laptop I had bought her for school, the jewelry I had surprised her with on her birthday, the headphones she wore constantly. All of it was mine in the sense that I had paid for it, sacrificed for it, handed it over with the hope it would earn me a place. I gathered it piece by piece. The laptop went back into its box. The jewelry into a pouch. The headphones, coiled and stuffed into my bag. Every item was a reminder. This is what I gave, this is what was dismissed as temporary. I wasn't stealing. I was reclaiming the fragments of myself I had foolishly handed away. Downstairs, I pulled the files from the drawer where Emily kept the bills. The mortgage statement, unpaid yet again because I had been the one covering it each month. The health insurance paperwork. School fees. The stack of expenses that had fallen to me, silently, while Dan floated on the periphery like a ghost who never had to pay. I left them all spread across the kitchen table, stark and undeniable. When Emily walked in and saw me with Hannah's laptop under my arm, her eyes widened. What are you doing? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Taking back what's mine. She dropped the knife onto the cutting board, her hands trembling. You can't just. I cut her off. I can. And I am. I've been the one paying for everything. I've been the one raising them. And if I'm nothing more than temporary, then I won't leave my permanence behind. Her face crumpled. She stepped toward me, voice breaking. Please don't do this. The kids didn't mean it that way. They're just... I turned on her, my words sharp enough to cut. No, Emily. They meant it exactly that way. Hannah said I'd disappear, and you told me not to take it personally. So now I'm proving both of you right. I'm disappearing. She reached for my arm, desperate. Don't punish them for being kids. They don't understand. I shook her hand off. Then they'll learn. Now they'll know what temporary really looks like. I walked out with my bags, with the gifts I had bought, with the weight of years crammed into the trunk of my car. Emily followed me onto the porch, tears streaking her face, begging. I didn't look back. By the time the engine turned over, my phone was already buzzing. Her voice filled the line before I could hang up. Please come back. The kids didn't mean it. Tyler doesn't even know what's happening. Hannah, she's sorry. She's just a teenager. Please don't do this. I hung up without answering. That night, I drove south, down the long stretch of highway that led away from Austin, away from the life I had built like a fool. The city lights faded, replaced by the dark sprawl of Texas countryside, until finally I reached San Antonio, where a small apartment waited, empty, quiet, mine. The silence of that first night was suffocating, but also cleansing. No footsteps upstairs, no laughter at my expense, no sighs from Emily telling me not to take it personally, just silence and the echo of my own decision. Days passed before Tyler came. He showed up at my door, shoulders hunched, his eyes darting between the ground and my face. I let him in, said nothing, waited. I didn't realize how much you did until you were gone, he admitted finally, his voice breaking. The bills, the rides, the everything. I thought you'd always just be there. I studied him, this boy who wasn't mine by blood but had been mine in every other way. Appreciation doesn't build a family, Tyler. Respect does. And respect was the one thing I never got. He nodded, eyes wet, but he didn't argue. Hannah never came. She sent only a text, short, as if the words cost her too much. Sorry. That was all. Sorry. Not for what she said, not for how she had dismissed me, but sorry in the way people say it when they want the mess cleaned up without lifting a finger. Emily called the most. Her messages swung between fury and pleading. One day she screamed that I was cruel, selfish, abandoning them. The next, she begged me to come home, to forgive, to try again. I ignored them all, because the truth was simple. I had already given everything, and it had never been enough. At night, I sat in my bare apartment, surrounded by the proof of what I had provided. Boxes of gifts reclaimed, stacks of bills left behind like evidence at a crime scene. I thought of Emily's voice, begging, of Tyler's eyes filled with guilt, of Hannah's single-word text. And every time I reminded myself, they told me I was temporary. Now they understood the meaning of the word. The split itself was simple. On paper, there was nothing binding us but a house deed and a handful of bills. Emily and I had never married. Legally, walking away was as clean as signing a few documents and cutting off a few automatic transfers. No lawyers tearing us apart, no custody battles, no courts deciding who got what. But simplicity on paper doesn't mean simplicity in the heart. What I left behind wasn't just a woman I had once believed I loved. What I left behind was the illusion of a family, a decade of effort, and the hollow echo of a dream I had spent nearly 10 years building. The first week in San Antonio, I wandered my apartment like a stranger. The walls were bare, the air still. No sound of Hannah's music bleeding through the floorboards. No slam of Tyler's door. No clatter of Emily moving through the kitchen. I used to complain about the noise. Now, in its absence, I realized how much of myself I had tied to it. There were no family dinners to rush home for. No science projects waiting for my late-night help. No birthday parties to plan. No practices to drive to. Just silence. Pressed down on me at first, heavier than I expected. But in that silence, another realization crept in, slow and undeniable. For the first time in years, I was living without being tolerated. I remembered Emily's words, her endless refrain, "Don't take it personally." The way she brushed off every slight, every wound. I remembered Hannah's voice, casual and cruel. "He's temporary anyway. He'll disappear." I remembered Tyler's shrug at breakfast. "We appreciate you." And I realized those three things summed up my place in that house. Tolerated. Never loved. Never claimed. The quiet of my apartment was different. Lonely, yes. Empty, yes. But honest. Emily tried to break through it. The calls came every night at first, her voice swinging between fury and despair. One night she screamed that I was cruel, that I was abandoning children who had depended on me. The next, she sobbed into the receiver, begging me to come back, promising it could be different. I let the calls go unanswered. Her words were just as hollow as Dan's promises had been. Hannah texted twice. The first was the short, flat sorry. The second came days later, "Mom's a wreck." Tyler too. "Please come back." I stared at the message for a long time before deleting it. They didn't want me back. They wanted the provider, the safety net, the man they could take for granted. Tyler showed up once more weeks later. He stood in my doorway, shoulders slumped, his face pale. "I didn't understand," he said. "I thought you'd always be there. I didn't know how much you did until you left." I nodded, but I didn't let him in. "That's the problem, Tyler. You never knew. And I'm done living in a house where I'm invisible until I'm gone." He swallowed, blinked hard, and finally turned away. I watched him walk down the hall and disappear into the parking lot. He never came again. Months passed. The apartment filled slowly with pieces of a life that belonged only to me. A framed photograph of the lake at dawn. A bookshelf stacked with novels I never had time to read before. I began cooking for one, walking at night through the quiet streets, learning the feel of solitude without resentment humming under it. There were moments of grief, of course. I'd see a father with his kids in the grocery store, laughing over something as small as which cereal to buy, and I'd feel a pang in my chest. I'd think of the birthday parties, the family trips, the Christmas mornings. I'd wonder if any of it had been real, or if I had just been play-acting in a role no one ever wanted me to fill. But the grief never lasted long. Peace always returned, sharper, cleaner. Because peace, I discovered, is not the same as happiness. Peace is the absence of humiliation. Peace is no longer begging for love that never arrives. Emily never stopped calling, though over time the desperation faded into bitterness. Her last message came 3 months after I left. "You destroyed us. One day you'll regret it." I stared at the screen, and for the first time I felt nothing. Not anger, not sorrow, not even the temptation to reply. Just nothing. Did I destroy them? Or did I simply remove the scaffolding they had leaned on without respect, forcing them to stand on their own broken foundation? That question haunted me less with every passing day. Because the truth was clear. You don't stay where you're merely tolerated. You don't keep giving where respect is denied. I had built a life on the belief that love could be earned through sacrifice, that if I gave enough money, time, effort, I would be seen as theirs. I see now that sacrifice without recognition is slavery, and I was no one's slave anymore. Now I live alone. No family dinners, no school events, no photographs of smiling faces on the mantel. The apartment is quiet, the nights long, but my chest no longer carries the weight of their contempt. For the first time in years, I feel something close to peace. And still, sometimes, I hear Hannah's words echoing in the back of my mind. "He's temporary anyway. He'll disappear." She was right. I was temporary. I did disappear. But the irony is this: they were the ones who made me temporary. They were the ones who pushed me out with their silence, their shrugs, their indifference. And now, when they look back, when they tell themselves the story of the man who left, they will know the truth. They made me disappear. So now I ask you, the stranger reading this, the witness to my confession, was I wrong? Was I wrong to walk away, to take back what I had given, to leave them with the void they swore I would become? Or was this the only way to reclaim my dignity from a family that never wanted me? You tell me, what would you have done?